There's a moment of profound realization when the person who once sought to dismantle you begins to grasp a terrifying truth. They hold no sway over you anymore. The very individual who belittled you, manipulated your feelings, and thrived on your distress suddenly starts to retreat. You can witness it in their eyes, a flash of panic, a palpable loss of dominance. This reversal isn't because you've become vindictive or cruel. It's because you've become something they can no longer exploit. You've found a solid foundation in truth, and truth is the kryptonite of the fainthearted. See, people who feel powerful only by hurting others always count on you remaining fragile. They expect you to endlessly justify yourself, keep apologizing, and continually try to prove your merit. This cycle is their mechanism of control. They operate by creating emotional turbulence and confusion. But the instant you withdraw your participation, when you stop validating their illusions, their inner framework starts to crumble. They begin to run, not from your physical presence, but because they cannot survive in a reality where you finally see them for who they truly are. The individual, the deceiver, the controller, the one who takes, they dwell in the shadows. Their entire influence is dependent on your lack of clarity. The moment your vision sharpens, you become a threat to them. You stop responding to emotional blackmail or pressure. You stand upright, unbowed. This simple act of moral fortitude sends a shockwave through their fragile sense of self. They can no longer look in the metaphorical mirror, because you, in your strength, have become the mirror. You reflect their small, deceitful, and cowardly reality, and that reflection is intolerable. When someone who used to oppress you begins to actively avoid you, it's a sure sign that your energy has fundamentally shifted. You've moved past the role of the person being harmed. You now move with a quiet, grounded might that needs no vocalization. There is something truly spiritual about this transformation. It's a fortitude born from enduring immense hardship and then refusing to carry the residue of that trauma forward. This terrifies them because they know deep down they could never possess that same resilience. They understand that your survival exposes their own weakness. Consequently, they flee not from you, but from the uncompromising reality your very presence embodies. This is what many misunderstand about genuine power. Real power is not noisy. It's not about seeking vengeance or needing to prove a point. It's the profound, calm stillness in your spirit when you look upon the one who tried to undo you and feel nothing but neutrality. That silence is more impactful than any outburst of anger. It declares without speaking, you no longer hold the reins. They can feel that stillness echoing within their own emptiness. They cannot manipulate silence. It is pure, untainted strength, and it incinerates their web of untruths like a brilliant sun cutting through the haze. You must internalize a fundamental truth. Those lacking courage attack what they fear. If they attempted to demolish you, it's because something in your character, your integrity, your empathy, your depth, made them feel insufficient. They tried to corrupt those qualities to make you doubt them. But now that you have rebuilt yourself, stronger and more refined, they cannot stand near your inherent light. You serve as a constant reminder of their every deceit, every false persona, and every time they chose maliciousness over kindness. Now watch them, panicked, evasive, pretending they are unbothered. Yet you can see right through it. That feigned indifference is merely fear wearing a different mask. They cannot face you because you now occupy the moral high ground. You have nothing left to conceal. You walked through the dark passages of life and emerged with your inner self whole. That is what truly alarms them. They know they could not do the same. There is a cosmic balance to this turnaround. The same hands that attempted to constrain you now tremble in your presence. The voices that ridiculed your suffering now whisper in private regret. This is not chance. It is consequence. The truth always finds its way back, and when it does, it's often an undeniable force. So, when you see them backing away, do not pursue. Let them run. Your purpose is not to try and inspire bravery in the faint-hearted. Your purpose is to live your authentic truth so clearly that their deceptions cannot survive in the same space. Their fear is no longer your burden. It is their internal reckoning. Every moment of anxiety they experience, every flash of regret, that is the consequence of their actions toward you. You don't need to announce your success. The simple fact that they cannot meet your gaze is irrefutable evidence of your triumph, because true strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks away calmly, leaving a vacuum where the destructive person's power used to reside. This is the sensation they now grapple with, that hollow ache, that rising panic, the realization that they are finally facing themselves without your energy to deflect their focus. You have become everything they dreaded, self-assured, insightful, and unbreakable. You no longer need their approval. And that, more than anything, utterly destroys their old control. They cannot feed off your hurt, cannot misuse your kindness, cannot twist your language. You have fully reclaimed your own story, and in doing so, you have completely reversed the dynamic. Now, they are the ones pursued by your silence. They are the ones re-examining every cruel word, every unjustifiable action. You didn't just escape their trap. You caused it to implode behind you. So, stand tall. Walk forward like someone who has already secured the victory, because you have. You withstood what was designed to ruin you. You have forged wisdom out of your pain and resilience out of your hardship. And that is the reason they are running. You remind them that integrity always prevails, that God's enduring spirit in a person cannot be extinguished, and that the resolve of someone who refuses to be kept down is truly unstoppable. Let them run. Their fear is the full confession you never needed to hear. That's an excellent continuation. Here is the rewritten continuation, structured for a podcast, maintaining the tone, constraints, and character limit guidelines. They inevitably begin to wonder, what went wrong? They'll start testing the boundaries. A fleeting message, a subtle rumor sent through a third party, a calculated attempt to stir a reaction. Why? Because in their worldview, that silence simply must be broken. They cannot tolerate not knowing what you are contemplating, what you are experiencing, whether you still afford them any attention. And this is the juncture where their true panic becomes visible. They are no longer cool, collected, or commanding. They are utterly desperate. Your non-engagement has become more forceful than your most passionate arguments ever were. This is the ultimate effect of stillness. It compels them to confront themselves. For the very first time, they are forced to sit with their own sense of wrongdoing, their inner lack of substance, and their long list of deceptions. When you cease to offer explanations, they lose their most effective weapon, the ability to distort your words. They cannot spin a false narrative any longer because you have stopped supplying them with source material. You cannot twist silence. And that is a terrifying realization for them, because silence communicates a profound truth. It states unequivocally that you have moved beyond them. It declares that you have achieved emotional detachment. It confirms you have seen through every illusion they labored to construct. This stillness also unmasks another critical fact. They never held any actual power over you. They only had influence over your reactions. They might have controlled how you felt, but never who you were. Now that influence has evaporated. They cannot reach you because you've adopted the wisdom that not every demand deserves your energy. You've learned that inner tranquility isn't gained by winning a petty dispute. It's found in the total absence of the need to dispute at all. This realization shatters their self-constructed delusion. They may label you as insensitive, emotionally unavailable, or unforgiving. They will insist you've fundamentally changed, and they are absolutely correct. You have evolved beyond their gravitational pull. You no longer speak their language of emotional chaos. They cannot comprehend your inner calm because it simply does not align with their world of control and high drama. What they fail to realize is that this deliberate quiet is not a form of retaliation. It is the essence of freedom. It is the quiet certainty that you owe them nothing, no final explanation, no attention, and no sense of closure. Yet your silence wounds them more deeply than any verbal confrontation ever could. Words can be argued against. Silence leaves them only with internal struggle, overthinking, and a downward spiral of paranoia. Why the lack of response? What are they planning? Have they completely forgotten me? This unrelenting guesswork is their consequence. They used to operate with absolute certainty, knowing exactly how to trigger you and get under your skin. Now all they possess is uncertainty, and it consumes them entirely. In your deliberate silence, they start to see their own reflection clearly for the first time. Without your presence serving as a constant distraction, they are left facing their own emptiness. They begin to grasp how much of their self-worth was predicated on having control over your life. Without that control, they feel utterly diminished. They feel irrelevant. This is precisely why they avoid you. They'll look away, pretend they don't notice you, and put on a show of indifference. But beneath that performance is naked fear. The fear of being reminded that they no longer matter to you. The fear of confronting the truth that they were never genuinely powerful. They were just excessively loud. You see, silence is not a sign of surrender. It is a deep transformation. It is the act of stepping entirely off the toxic emotional stage they created and refusing to play the part any longer. They needed you to be reactive because that's how they validated their own importance. They required your instability to affirm their sense of control. But you found peace, and that quiet peace is an atmosphere they cannot breathe in. It exposes the fact that they were never as significant as they truly believed. The most beautiful irony is that you didn't have to seek revenge or engage in a battle. You simply had to heal and grow. Every day you maintained that non-response, you were delivering a lasting lesson. The person they completely underestimated is now permanently out of their grasp. They cannot charm their way back. They cannot provoke you back. They cannot manipulate you back using emotional pressure. The silence is final, and they feel that certainty deep within their spirit. They may eventually tell others that you were the one with the problem, playing the victim to solicit sympathy. But at a fundamental level, they know the reality. They know your quietness stemmed from profound strength, not bitterness. And that realization is the ultimate agony for a manipulator, losing complete command over someone who once cared. Your quiet is now their mirror. Every time your existence crosses their mind, they are immediately confronted with the truth of their own character. Every time they recall their harmful actions, they feel the sharp sting of your absence. It is a form of poetic justice. Without lifting a single finger, you have exposed their profound weakness. Without uttering a single syllable, you have fully reclaimed your own power. So do not break that stillness for anyone who has not earned the privilege of your voice. You owe them nothing, not closure, not forgiveness, and certainly not your attention. Let them run from their own conscience. Let them bear the weight of their past actions in the profound quiet that follows. Because your silence is much more than the absence of sound. It is the palpable presence of strength. It is the sound of deep healing, and to them that sound is deafening. They never anticipated you would stand up with such grounded certainty. They always assumed you would crumble under their pressure, that you would continue seeking their validation, that you would remain ensnared in their elaborate emotional labyrinth. People of that nature build their confidence by ensuring others remain beneath them. They flourish on the notion that you will always require them to define your self-worth. But the precise moment you stood firm, without arguing, without pleading, something inside their construct shattered. You exposed their fragility just by existing in your truth. When you finally stopped defending yourself, when you refused to engage by their rigged rules, they realized they were never as powerful as they pretended to be. All the command they held over you existed only within your belief that they were the stronger party. The moment you saw through that illusion, everything changed. Your strength, which is real, grounded, and utterly calm, became unbearable for them to face because deep down they knew you possessed something they never would: authenticity. You did not need to manipulate anyone to feel secure in yourself. You did not need to fabricate lies to maintain a false image. You only needed to be real. And realness destroys deception as surely as light vanquishes darkness. That is why your quiet strength unsettles them so deeply. They cannot ridicule it. They cannot twist its meaning, and they cannot possibly fight against it without exposing their own profound fragility. Every person who seeks to control or manipulate, every person who hides their cowardice behind a facade of arrogance, shares one trait: they rely entirely on your emotional instability to maintain their control. Once you become spiritually grounded, their entire strategy collapses. They cannot spar with someone who refuses to take the bait. They cannot provoke someone who refuses to be moved. And so, they begin to disintegrate under the crushing weight of their own emptiness. You see, you didn't need to expose them through your words. You revealed them through your sheer composure. They anticipated anger. You offered tranquility. They expected tears. You provided silence. They thought you would pursue them. You simply chose to walk away. This absolute reversal of the dynamic hits them like an inescapable wave of truth, because for the first time, they are forced to confront the reality that their behavior is utterly transparent. They can observe in your gaze that you have finally seen through their act. And once you perceive the truth, it is impossible to unsee, for you and for them. Now every time your paths cross, they feel it. That profound awareness burns them from within. You have become the living evidence that the dominance they boasted of was never real. You were the one sustaining the bond, the connection, the entire relationship. You were the one pouring meaning into something that was fundamentally hollow. Now that you have withdrawn your energy, they are laid bare for what they truly are: fragile, deeply insecure, and desperate for outside validation. Your very presence, even when you remain silent. Compels them to face that harsh reality. They cannot tolerate being near you anymore because your entire being now contradicts the illusion they carefully constructed. You used to be their source of emotional energy, the one they could manipulate to feel temporarily powerful. But you have grown far beyond that dependency. You have forged an inner foundation that they cannot possibly penetrate. You have learned that your peace is not conditional on anyone else's approval. That realization gives you a profound calm that is alien to their tumultuous world. And that quiet calm is exceptionally potent. It exposes everything fake, everything untrue, and everything cowardly. That's the ultimate irony. The same individuals who once scorned you as weak now recoil in your presence. They believed they had destroyed you, but all they achieved was forging you anew. You took every wound, every act of betrayal, every deception, and transformed it into a wise kind of armor. Not the type that hardens you into bitterness, but the kind that grants you unparalleled insight. You now see through manipulation as clearly as glass. You sense deceit before a word is spoken. You know how to detach without carrying guilt. And that is the thing that truly terrifies them. Your capacity to leave and never look back. When someone who used to control your emotional state starts actively avoiding you, it's not respect. It is pure fear. They are petrified that your solid strength will publicly expose them again. They fear that being near you will remind others of who they truly are. You no longer even need to speak your side of the story. Your growth tells it all for you. People sense the shift. They observe the tranquility in your eyes, the quiet confidence in your posture, the clarity that defines your actions. Meanwhile, the one who harmed you is desperately trying to keep a mask glued together, a mask that is cracking more with every passing day. You have become a living challenge to everything they believed about their own superiority. They cannot call you frail anymore because your determined actions prove the opposite. They cannot paint you as erratic because you are calm and centered. They cannot portray themselves as superior because your evolution exposes their fundamental smallness. Every forward step you take feels like a spotlight shining directly onto their insecurity. And instead of owning that discomfort, they flee into the shadows, praying you will vanish from their perception so they can stop feeling like a fraud. What they fail to grasp is that this strength wasn't gained overnight. You earned this resilience. It emerged from nights of self-doubt, from the process of breaking down and painstakingly rebuilding, and from learning the essential truth that genuine peace is not received from others, it must be cultivated from within. You faced every insecurity they attempted to plant within you, and you emerged stronger because of that confrontation. That level of self-mastery is something they will never comprehend. They only know how to simulate strength, not how to truly build it. You've now reached a point where you simply no longer require their acknowledgement. You don't need them to confess their actions. You don't even need them to feel regret. Their opinion has zero power over your identity. That powerful independence terrifies them because it signifies their complete irrelevance. Individuals who operate like this crave being the focal point of your emotional world. Once you permanently remove them from that position, they lose all sense of significance. And rather than stepping up and taking accountability, they do what all cowards do. They run. But here is the unchanging truth. They cannot escape themselves. Every instance they think of you, they are reminded of the better person they could have been if they weren't enslaved by their own ego and fear. They are reminded of how foolishly they mistook your inherent kindness for weakness, how futilely they tried to dominate someone who was destined to eventually outgrow them. You have become the living symbol of everything they ultimately failed to demolish: self-respect, grounded strength, and unshakable resilience. So, let them be afraid. Let them conceal themselves behind their false arrogance. You are under no obligation to prove anything to them anymore. The very way you conduct yourself now is proof enough. You expose their true weakness not through conflict, but by simply living differently, by walking in truth while they remain drowning in their own deceptions. They thought they were your instructor, but you became their most profound lesson. And that is the extent of the power they will never comprehend. The quiet, unshakable fortitude of someone who no longer needs to justify why they walked away. For individuals whose sense of self relies on control, nothing is more terrifying than its loss. Their entire self-worth is contingent on their ability to dominate the emotional climate of others, especially those who deeply care about them. They need to feel like the sole reason for your reactions, the hidden hand pulling the strings. When that control vanishes, when you stop reacting in the predictable ways they engineered, their world implodes. That is when the truth hits them. The power they believed they had was never real. It was simply on loan from your patience, your kindness, and your loyalty. You were the essential source of it all. And once you withdrew your energy, everything they built instantly collapsed. When you began to grow emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, it shattered their illusion of superiority. They could no longer manipulate you through guilt, through fear, or through deceptive charm. Their old playbook ceased to function. You began to see through every lie, every subtle manipulation, and every calculated silence. They detected that change immediately, long before you even voiced it. You stopped being predictable. You stopped needing their external validation. You stopped participating in their relentless games. That shift sent shockwaves through their entire system because it signaled the end of their control. You were now outside their system. You became an entity they could no longer define or manipulate. Those who abuse, those who exhibit toxic behavior, they rely heavily on emotional dominance. They meticulously study your weaknesses. They commit your vulnerabilities to memory and ruthlessly use them against you. But once you look directly at your pain and own it, those old triggers lose all their force. You no longer react in the way they expect. You begin to respond from a place of clarity instead of raw emotion. You stop explaining yourself to individuals who only wish to distort your words. You stop needing to defend your inherent worth. That calm, confident detachment utterly confuses them. They can't read you anymore. And when they can't read you, they can't possibly control you. You must grasp how profoundly this shakes their foundation. Their entire illusion of supremacy rests upon your compliance. They require the constant feeling of being the authority figure. When you decisively remove that, you reveal the stark reality. Without control, they possess nothing. Their confidence was mere posturing. Their arrogance was nothing more than a defense mechanism for deep-seated insecurity. Their supposed dominance was never authentic strength. It was simply fear masquerading as power. The moment you refused the role they assigned you, they were forced to look at their true selves, and they simply could not endure that sight. This is why your forward momentum registers as an attack to them. You weren't threatening them. You weren't even actively seeking retribution. You merely stopped supplying their essential needs: attention, excuses, and that crucial emotional sustenance. In their skewed perception, your newfound independence registers as treachery. They cannot comprehend that you simply evolved past the toxic dynamic. Your peace is interpreted as open defiance. Your established boundaries are seen as a direct rejection. Your silence is automatically cataloged as condemnation. Their fractured mindset interprets your healing process as active hostility because they have completely lost command over the story. And this is where their real fear sets in. They begin to feel exposed. They worry about what you now understand, what truths you've uncovered, and what you might choose to articulate. They sense that the carefully maintained mask they've worn for years is finally beginning to shred. In front of others, they might project an image of composure, but internally, they are fragmenting. They cannot tolerate the change in how you regard them. Your eyes, which once held confusion or hurt, now hold absolute clarity. And clarity is devastatingly potent to anyone who depends on deceit to survive. When your personal evolution dismantles their cherished illusion, they default to the action of the truly faint of heart. They flee. They vanish before any direct confrontation can occur, desperately hoping to escape the consequences of their own actions. Yet, what they are truly running from is exposure. They are terrified that the genuine facts will surface, that others will see them through the same sharp lens you now use. They fear becoming irrelevant, losing control, not just over you, but over the perception others hold of them, because that external image is what sustains their fragile reality. You have effectively stripped them of the one thing they desperately crave: emotional leverage. In its place, you have constructed something completely indestructible: self-respect. They cannot compete with that foundation. They cannot manipulate it, induce guilt about it, or twist it into something negative. You have built yourself from the core outwards. Conversely, their entire identity remains contingent upon external approval. This is why your mere existence now feels like a critical threat to them. You are a constant, living reminder that genuine strength arises from truth, not from control. And here is the part that strikes them the most profoundly. Deep down, they know they never possessed true power. They understand that their supposed strength only existed because you permitted it. The instant you stopped accepting their lies, the entire facade crumbled. They are left standing amidst the wreckage of their own deceit, realizing that every tactic they employed to dominate you only served to highlight their own profound inner void. This realization is devastating for them, because for the first time, they are forced to view themselves not as the powerful puppet master, but as the weak pretender. They will certainly attempt to convince others that you are the one who changed, that you became cold or hostile. But the reality is far simpler. You woke up. You ceased pouring your precious energy into people who didn't deserve it. You stopped maintaining connections rooted in manipulation. You started prioritizing your inner peace over their need for validation. The moment you accomplished that, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. Now, your undeniable growth speaks volumes more loudly than their feeble lies. Every time your name surfaces, they are reminded of the strength they tried so hard to suppress. Every personal success, every moment of earned tranquility, every boundary you establish acts as a mirror, reflecting their complete failure to break you. They will continue to evade, continue to feign confidence, continue to hide, but they know the inescapable truth. You outgrew them, and there is no reverse gear. That is the definitive image of true victory. It's not about revenge or engaging in drawn-out confrontation. It's about quiet, sustained evolution. You didn't need to destroy them. You only needed to outgrow the false reality they imposed. You took your pain, your confusion, and your moments of breaking, and you transformed them into tangible growth. And that growth, the development they never believed you were capable of achieving, is what utterly annihilated their perceived power. Every time they think of you now, there is an unsettling flicker they can't quite identify. It's a mixture of lingering guilt laced with acute fear. They remember their actions, the manipulations, the cruelty, but instead of processing it, they bury it, desperately trying to convince themselves it wasn't as severe as it seemed. Yet your very existence drags it all back to the surface. You have become the living monument to their poor choices, their deception, and their betrayal. They cannot tolerate that reminder, so they run from it. But the truth doesn't dissolve simply because they refuse to look at it. It follows them like an inescapable shadow, whispering everything they fight so hard to forget. Initially, they might put on a convincing show of being completely fine. They'll socialize more, present a louder exterior, and surround themselves with people unaware of the actual history. They'll construct a facade of peace, hoping the noise drowns out the internal guilt. But guilt is relentless. It doesn't adhere to a schedule. It surfaces in the quiet intervals late at night, in moments of profound solitude. That's when the performance fails. That's when they remember your eyes. The moment you truly saw them, that's when the definitive truth landed. They actively harmed someone who genuinely cared for them, and that realization burns deeper than they ever anticipated. You have become their unavoidable mirror. And that mirror never lies. Every time they consider you, they see their authentic selves, not the character they try to play. They see the cowardice underpinning their cruelty. They see how easily they betrayed someone who would have unconditionally supported them. They see how their arrogance was purely a symptom of insecurity. They feel shame disguised as anger. They will try to rationalize it by claiming you were too sensitive, or that you somehow deserved their treatment. Why? Because accepting the actual truth would instantly demolish the entire self-concept they built. But that concept is already failing. And you are the architect of that collapse. They cannot tolerate being in your vicinity anymore because your steady inner calm highlights their internal chaos. Your self-respect clearly illuminates their deep-seated insecurity. Your forgiveness, even if unspoken, serves as a stark contrast to their pettiness. Each time you pass by without a flicker of reaction, it throws them off balance. They can sense you have moved on, that you no longer perceive them as dominant or intimidating. That profound indifference cuts far deeper than any act of revenge ever could. Why? Because what they truly crave, what every manipulative person fundamentally craves, is significance. And your hard-won peace delivers the unmistakable message that, to you, they have none. It's not that they suddenly fear you as an individual. They are terrified of what you represent. You embody growth, accountability, and integrity, all the principles they have successfully sidestepped their entire lives. Your strength forces them into a confrontation with their own profound weakness. Your calm presence drags their buried guilt to the surface. And instead of owning it, they retreat. They run because to face you is to face themselves. And that is something the spiritually timid cannot endure. Deep down, they know they cannot undo the harm they inflicted. They cannot retract the cruel words, the manipulation, or the betrayal. They attempt to bury it, but guilt is not a thing that stays buried. It always finds a way to surface. Every success you achieve, every indication that your life is thriving without their interference, intensifies that guilt, because they realized they weren't just cruel. They were profoundly foolish. They attempted to destroy someone who only sought to support them, who genuinely cared for them, who believed in their better nature. And that monumental error haunts their consciousness. You have likely observed how they cannot sustain eye contact anymore, how they dodge conversations or change the subject when your name arises. This is because guilt carries a physical weight. It causes their heart to race upon seeing you. It tightens their throat. It makes them feel completely exposed. They foolishly believe that flight will offer escape. But guilt is not localized to external places. It resides inside them. No matter where they go, it is their constant companion. The most agonizing truth for them is knowing that you are not pursuing them, that you are not seeking confrontation or demanding closure. You have completely moved on. You accepted the reality of what happened and successfully refined that pain into unshakable strength. You have learned, healed, and evolved. They, in stark contrast, are trapped in the very same emotional prison they initially tried to construct for you. They convinced themselves they left you shattered, but now they are the ones carrying the fragments. Every time they think of you, it is not nostalgia. It is torment. You see, when a person commits a deep wrong against another, two paths diverge. They either learn and achieve personal growth, or they deny the truth and emotionally stagnate. Most choose the second path because confronting guilt demands genuine courage. It requires humility, and cowards lack both. They will attempt to suppress the guilt by assigning blame to you, by desperately rewriting the history, by pretending you were the source of the issues. But even in their aggressive denial, they know the truth. The human conscience possesses an innate voice, one that speaks even when ignored. It whispers in the solitary moments. It disrupts their sleep. It paints vivid recollections of the actions they wish they could erase. And this is where your silent power resides. You no longer need to prove anything. You don't need to actively inflict guilt. Life is already executing that consequence for you. Every tranquil day you enjoy, every moment of happiness you cultivate, stands as undeniable proof that they were wrong. They witness your strength and realize they didn't just lose a person. They forfeited the best version of themselves that existed while you were in their life. That specific brand of regret doesn't simply fade away. It stains the very soul. You have entirely outgrown the necessity for their apology, yet they cannot escape their own desperate need for your eventual forgiveness. They will never openly admit this, but the need festers inside them like a chronic ache. They will obsessively wonder if you hate them, if you've erased them, if you ever spare them a thought. The truth is, you likely don't anymore, not with malice, and certainly not with attachment. And that precise fact is what drives them to distraction, because their guilt depends on your attention for survival. When you stop feeding it, it turns inward. It begins the process of consuming them from the inside out. That is the essential reason they run. They cannot tolerate the version of themselves that your strength reflects back at them. They cannot bear the knowledge that someone they deliberately harmed survived, thrived, and now lives in peace without them. Your calmness exposes their persistent turmoil. Your unstoppable growth highlights their stagnation. Your silence now screams louder than any direct confrontation ever could. So let them avoid you. Let them hide. Their pervasive guilt and fear are no longer your burden to carry. You fulfilled your responsibility. You survived. You learned. You rose above it. Now their own conscience will manage the rest. And it will do so slowly, relentlessly, because guilt possesses a flawless memory. It does not forget. It shadows them, whispers to them. And eventually, when there is nowhere left for them to hide, it will force them to confront the magnitude of their actions. By that time, you will be far ahead, living freely, completely untouched by the chaos they attempted to create. And that, unequivocally, is the definition of justice. When you finally settled into that place of inner peace, they were left utterly paralyzed. They had built their entire sense of control on your reactions, your anger, your confusion, your pain. They had meticulously studied how to trigger you, how to inject self-doubt, and how to successfully drag you into emotional turmoil. That was their psychological comfort zone. But when you completely stopped engaging, when you refused to participate in their endless games, the balance of power shifted completely. Your calm became their most devastating crisis. Your peace transformed into the loudest declaration of independence they had ever been forced to witness. It is a profound irony how stillness can resonate more loudly than words. For people who thrive on dominance, silence feels like utter suffocation. They cannot stand being unable to read you, not knowing what you think or what you feel. When you no longer offer explanations, defend your choices, or justify your peace, they lose all capacity to influence you. They begin to realize that your valuable emotional energy is simply no longer available to them. And that realization is paralyzing. They feel insignificant. They feel invisible. And that acute loss of control causes them to spiral into the very same emotional confusion they once routinely inflicted upon you. You must understand that peace is not passive. It is one of the most potent forms of self-defense available. It is the stillness that arrives after the storm, the quiet only those who have survived chaos can truly grasp. When you find this inner peace, it does not imply that you have forgotten the pain. They mistook your tranquility for weakness because they are unable to comprehend the immense cost of remaining calm after being intentionally broken. You rebuilt yourself painstakingly, piece by piece, in silence and far away from their toxic influence. You learned to master your own emotional landscape, to sit with your pain, and to successfully transform it into crystal clear vision. That is a form of self-mastery they will never achieve. Now, every time they see you unbothered, it is a painful sting. It communicates the undeniable truth. Their entire system of manipulation failed. It tells them that you have outgrown the emotional space they tried to hold you captive in. They begin to realize that you have no need for them, not for their validation, not for their hollow apology, and not for their approval. You have moved past the version of yourself that once tolerated their behavior. And because they can no longer access you emotionally, they begin to crumble internally. You flip the script without uttering a single word. Their initial confusion rapidly grows into profound fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of losing control. Fear of being forgotten. You became thoroughly unpredictable. And unpredictability is a nightmare for a manipulator. They cannot measure your emotions or anticipate your next move. They cannot play their game anymore because the game board no longer exists. That's when their panic truly sets in. They may desperately attempt to provoke you again, hoping to drag you back into the old familiar patterns. But you have learned far too much. You have built an emotional boundary that is invisible yet completely impenetrable. Your established peace is not merely the absence of external noise. It is the powerful presence of strength. It is the unmistakable mark of someone who has mastered their own mind. When they observe you walking with quiet, assured confidence, they don't see mere serenity. They see undeniable power. They see someone they cannot manipulate. Someone who is not afraid. Someone who no longer dances to their destructive tune. And this realization infuriates them. It forces them to question their entire self-worth, because they have lost the ability to control the very person they once believed was their weakest link. There is a profound and unsettling quality to being confronted by someone you intentionally tried to break, only to discover that they have become unbreakable. They vividly recall the former version of you who pleaded for understanding, who tried to rationalize your feelings, who desperately wanted peace through compromise. But the evolved you has realized that peace is not something you beg for. It is something you must build alone if necessary. You took all the inflicted pain and successfully converted it into disciplined focus, emotional mastery, and continuous growth. This final short continuation segment concludes the podcast script with a powerful summary of the main themes. That complete transformation is the thing that terrifies them most of all. Because in witnessing your healing, they are forced to confront their own profound inability to change. They run, not because you pose a direct threat to them, but because you expose the raw truth of who they are simply by existing within your unshakable calm. They cannot handle the quiet dignity you carry now. They cannot face the fact that your stillness is a final verdict, an unspoken reminder that you have permanently risen above their level, and you don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to try and prove a single thing. Your composure speaks volumes. It says clearly and calmly, I see you for what you are, and I am no longer available to participate in your destructive game. In the end, that is the ultimate blow that breaks their control. They cannot destroy what they no longer even begin to understand. They cannot manipulate someone who has completely stopped seeking external validation. Your hard-won peace has become the single thing they absolutely cannot touch. And that realization is unbearable for them. So they run, not because you are a danger, but because you are an undeniable mirror, reflecting everything they desperately fear within their own hearts. You have become a profound reminder that people can fully heal without seeking revenge. That true strength doesn't always roar. It can whisper, and that whisper, that unshakable calm, is precisely what drives them into a state of chaos. Your peace has become their crisis. It shows them, beyond any doubt, how fundamentally powerless they truly are when they can no longer command your emotions. You have completely reclaimed your life, your vital energy, and your entire mind. And that, more than anything, is the lasting victory they will never recover from.